Okay, so let's do it. So, give me a sec. I'm managing. Is everybody able to see my screen properly now? Can I just get a yes, no?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, okay, great. So thank you for joining us today to talk about eco-anxiety to climate communication. So I will do a first very quick introduction about myself, and then we will do a little emotional check-in about how you feel about the climate change. And then I will be talking about some suggestions on how to do climate communication. So I don't know, are you a teacher or are you like a eco group? You want to use some of this technique? And for those who join us for the first time, this section will be recorded and the stacks, the material will be available to you by email. So don't worry about copying anything. Feel free to use this for education purposes. So to start off, I am Benita. I am from Encompass, which is the social enterprise which hosts this webinar today. I am a passionate scuba diver. I've been diving in Hong Kong and all around the world for the last 20 years. And I've seen a lot of coral bleaching, and that means like coral being affected by temperature. And that is like one of my big motivation of doing this type of work. So I founded this social enterprise called Encompass in 2018. The picture you see here is called TEDx Encompass. So we did this last year, last October, to talk about climate change. We have a speaker talking about microplastic, talking about climate justice, talking about like upcycling and all that. We are still uploading some videos on the platform, but if you're interested to find out how our talks are, please do. We do a lot of experiential workshops and learning programs. So if you go to our website, we have done program on climate change on wine, climate change on coffee, and all that fun stuff. And really, our mission is to help individuals or organizations to achieve the SDGs. So just to brief you, you probably would know this. These are the 17 SDGs founded by the United Nations goals. They are, I really like this framework. I think it's a very good way to understand our world. And here's my favorite diagram. I don't know how many of you seen this. This is called the SDG kick. So basically we have the biodiversity, the climate change goal in the bottom, and then we have people. So when you have the planet goals fulfilled, you can talk about people, which include education, well-being, and all that. And then we have prosperity, which is the decent work and condition. And then we have peace and partnership. So I think we all know Greta Thunberg. She's a very famous climate activist. And she gave very like passionate speech about climate change. So for example, here she said, I don't want you to feel hope. I don't want you to feel hopeful. I want you to panic and act if the house on fire. So she was like, climate change is really burning us. So before I go further into the topic, I don't know how many of you have tried this. This is called a blob tree. And you can either say in the chat room, or if you can share. I just want to see, so it seems some of you are concerned about climate change from the poll. How would you feel when we talk about climate change? So if you're feeling like I'm feeling like number 10, I'm feeling very hopeful, or I'm feeling number 14, I'm falling. So I just want to get a sense of how this would feel. So anybody want to go, or I'm going to pick on people? You want to go, Tiff?
Yeah, I feel a bit like number 8, kind of observing from a distance and not really wanting to like jump into any groups as such. I like to like observe and kind of observe from a distance and see what's happening.
Thank you, Tiff. So hopefully you'll make some observation today, and you can tell me afterwards how you feel. Anybody else want to share? Carol, you want to share? Or hi, Carol. Yeah.
Hi, maybe number 7. I'm kind of hanging on and trying to help. Doing small things to sort of, I do a lot for recycling and try and educate people. But yeah, it's very scary.
It is very scary, and we will talk about those emotions in a second. And any third person want to share before we move on? Anybody?
Yeah, I thought maybe even 13 or 19, where you're kind of trying to do your bit, but noticing that a lot of people around you are either unaware or just not doing very much. Yeah.
And sorry, Cassia, I think you're the first time to a workshop. I just wonder, can you share where you're from and if you're working on climate change?
Yeah, I'm from the UK. I live in Bristol, which is quite a climate conscious city, but it's still kind of across the UK. It's not really, it's like known about, but just kind of very much ignored. And if you speak about it, people kind of, unless they're on your side, they kind of brush over and say, you know, you're just a hippie or whatever. So hard to get the conversation going, which is why I'm interested in improving the climate communication skill side of it, because people are often defensive about it.
Yeah, so today I'm going to first talk about the different emotions. So some of you have shared like whether you're observing or you're feeling like it's not working, and I will talk about some strategy where we can do that. And anybody else not from Hong Kong want to share as well? I know we have a very diverse group. Henry, are you from Hong Kong? Just curious. Okay, I've lost Henry. Okay, never mind. But thank you everybody for sharing. We have more time for discussion, so I will go on. I do like this emotion check-in, and you can use for different things. So maybe next time you want to ask your friend how they feel, instead of asking them to describe the emotion, you can use this tree as a metaphor for them to discuss. So let me move. Okay, so I think when we talk about climate change, so like Cassie has shared, you can feel a mix of many emotions. You can feel angry, you can feel frustrated, you can feel hopeful at times. It's a very complicated feeling. So how do we actually like articulate those? So I want to share with this with you. I don't know how many of you have seen this diagram. It's not. This diagram is prepared by a guy called Isaias, the founder behind Green Brown Vegan, and he write a lot about the impact of his activism on his mental health. It's not original. It's based on a work that done by an Australian professor called Glenn Elchett, but he has modified it, and there are some really it looks very complicated term here. So I'm just trying to briefly go through all of them and see if you resonate with any of them. So the first one on top is Utiera. So it means feeling of being interconnected to the world, and you feel like positive things about the environment. It seems from our mini check-in just now, none of you have, I don't know if I'm mistaken this, none of you have feeling that. The next one is soliphilia. It means love and appreciation of a location or a planet that is deep rooted in interconnectedness and allow you to cultivate and construct healing practices that are connected to the environment. So the first one is solastalgia, and I'm hoping getting the pronunciation correct. It means it's environmental induced stress that evoke when a person feels the natural environment is impacted, they feel like anxiety and sorrow. The fourth one, and probably the most known one, is the eco-anxiety. So the way that the future of our ecological disaster that happen continue to worsen, and we are feeling very worried. So I think that is probably how some of us feel. And then there's eco-paralysis, meaning we are unable to respond to the climate crisis because it's just so paralyzing. It's just like overwhelming. And then we have eco-guilt. I don't know, some of us, I don't know if our friend from Bristol feel that way, if it's that you are very privileged to, in that part of the world, that you are not you're not being affected by climate change as much, so you feel that you want to do more for the society. And then there's eco-grieving. Eco-grieving meaning that a grief that is feeling about the earth, that you can't do anything about it. And then there's terra trauma, meaning the sudden grief you feel when you are witnessing a traumatic environmental change. So it could be like a sudden flooding or sudden I don't know, big snowstorm. You feel like that you are feeling traumatic about it. And then the last one is eco-rage. You're feeling that because that the system and the people in power are not doing much on the environment, so you're feeling anger. So I just want to quickly ask the group: does any of this this description apply to how you feel just now? So we used the blob tree to discuss, but does any of this resonate with you?
No.
How will you describe Rob? Hi, Rob. You like the blob tree better? This one doesn't explain how you feel.
This is too many options.
Too many options. Okay. So if there are like maybe one or two adjectives just to describe how you feel about the environment, what would that be? Or should I go back to this one? Is it easier? Okay, I guess I lost you, Rob. So anybody else want to say if they feel like this, describe how they feel about the environment?
Hi.
Hi, Jane. Hi, Jane.
Hi. I got here. Thank you to you. Looking at this as a scale, I think that I do feel sometimes from the top, Tierra, I feel the same sometimes, but very rarely. Soliphilia, yeah. Solastalgia, definitely. Eco-anxiety, most of the time. Eco-paralysis, quite often. Eco-guilt, quite often as well. And eco-grieving, particularly. But I haven't got down to Tierra trauma and eco-rage yet. But I think I feel all those that I've mentioned at different times, and sometimes parallel times. It's quite conflicted. I feel quite guilty that in Hong Kong, though we're not very environmental, we don't seem to suffer from the consequences of our action or inaction as much as other places. So yes, quite a lot of those, I feel.
Thank you. And I guess a lot of us at different part of our life, or because of different things that happen around us, we feel a mix of that. So yes, I'm not. Thank you for sharing, Jane. And I will move on, and then maybe we have more time to discuss like how we cope with this in later. So the problem is climate change is not a very fun problem. Some people just avoid it to then deal with it. And just to reiterate, eco-anxiety, which is the focus of today's talk, is the overwhelming powerless some people feel and experience when they feel about these subjects. So it can be because the problems are overly anxiety, or that we don't have the means to deal with those. So at the moment, I'm going to talk with you some strategies we can communicate climate change to other people. So other people are not feeling powerless, but they feel like they can actually do something about it. So just want to share with you just some quick quotes. These are actual quotes by research by this researcher in Botner back in 2008. So the first one is, I lay awake at night, worry about things like the environment, the way it's changing. I feel like at least, not sure about other parts of the world, but in Hong Kong, quite a bit of young people I meet, they do feel very strongly about the environment. That's why in Hong Kong, we have like a climate action Hong Kong group. The young people are campaigning about environment. And the second quote is a young woman who is attending therapy for a problem with drinking hop. So she's prone to maybe pregnant. And she said, because I'm going to be the first generation of women who can't have children because the earth is too unhealthy to sustain a new generation of people. I certainly feel like some of my friends, even though they're not having hookups, just my friend in general do feel that way, that they feel like the earth may be like in a not a very good place to have children. So it seems that eco-anxiety, it is affecting quite a bit of people. So here is a little more theoretical take on why we have those eco-anxiety, of those mix of feeling that Jane was talking about. It's going to be slightly theoretical, and I'm going to go through it a little bit quickly, but I think it will give you some idea of how this might work. So I will explain this very quickly. So cognitive dissonance occur when somebody's have contradictory beliefs or values that are typically experienced as psychological stress when they participate in an action that go against one or more of them. So when what they think and what they do may be not consistent. And we'll show you what are some examples. Cultural dissonance is an uncomfortable sense of discord, disharmony, confusion, or conflict experienced by people in the midst of change in their cultural environment. And again, I will give you some example. Emotional dissonance is a feel of feeling of uneasiness occur when someone evaluates an emotional experience as a threat to his or her identity. So first of all, the cognitive dissonance. So some people may say, I'm a good person, I care about planet, but I will continue to trash the world or whatever that is. So it seems some people are disconnect about what they really believe or what they really do. This happened to some people. And an example is Bill Nye. I don't know how many of you know him. He's a very famous science guy. So just a few years ago, he said this, what makes people think global warming isn't a thing, like it's February and 70 degrees outside. It seems that people have a certain worldview, and when they are confronted with the evidence that are conflicted with the worldview, they have dissonance, conflict in their mind. So another example is this diagram. It looks very complicated, but basically here, the message is some people in the face of overwhelming evidence, which most scientists is saying that climate change is because of human induced and global warming is occurring. It seems some people are still hold to the position that global warming is not happening. So how do we tell people that it's happening and what you do about it? So we'll look into that. Another example is this is across humanity, how many people think that the world is getting warmer. And you will see it's very interesting. It's actually India is the top in terms of saying human activity is available. And when you look at US is actually quite down below. US 6% of the people actually say climate change is not real, and 9% doesn't attribute global warming to human action. So it seems there are quite many climate deniers in this one of the biggest economy. And why is that? We'll look at that shortly, using US as a case study. So another one is cultural dissonance, is whether they having the worldview to fit with the climate change, fit into that. So an example is this one. So this, what you see here is in Americans, and in Americans we know there are different groups like liberal and conservative Republican, and you can see that it seems there are some association between the climate change value and the political spectrum, and which is quite interesting, right? Because it seems climate change should be a universal topic irrespective of your political field, but it seems this is happening. I don't know if there are any US audience here. I usually get more European audience than US, but I think this is quite an interesting diagram. And another interesting diagram here, this is a research by Cultural Cognition at Yale Law School. And if you're interested in the intersection between politics and climate change, this is a good resource. It seems, according to this theory, individuals hold opinions about political contests, issues like climate change, are consistent with their cultural way of thinking. So as you can see, when you go for more egalitarian and communalism, people actually become more concerned about climate change. So it seems there's some correlation between your political belief, your value system, and climate change. So the next one, so it's emotional dissonance. So the climate change is so big, we can't understand, we can't do anything about it. So I think that is part of the helplessness that some of us might feel. So it's it's too much to bear, it's too many feelings, too much outrage. So you just stop thinking about it. So this is another study. Also, sorry, a lot of this study is US based, but basically this is saying that quite a bit of people are feeling outraged about their feeling. For them, it's like we don't want to make them more like eco-rage, make them more angry, but we want to help them to understand the outrage they are feeling and what they can do, which we will talk about how do you communicate climate change in a good way so people are feeling that they can do something about it instead of helplessness. So we'll talk about that in the second part of today's presentation. So I don't know if this is showing up quickly, but if you are feeling eco-anxious or feeling a mix of whatever feeling that we discussed earlier, there are several ways you can do. You can meditate, inhale, smile, talk to other people about it, and in the end of today, I'm going to suggest you some strategy on how to talk about climate change, so you can talk about this difficult feeling and relate to others. So again, so we're going to switch from eco-anxiety to climate communication. So here are some of the experience that we just discussed. People fear of like cultural ties, they fear of emotional ties, they feel like facts and numbers don't affect them anymore. So how can we communicate those climate change? So first of all, this very big diagram, but basically saying you, telling you the risk of having climate change in different parts of the world. And this is another diagram saying that actually many people around the world say climate change is the #1 environmental issue. And if you look at a lot of studies now and people saying after COVID, climate change is going to be one of the biggest humanity threat. It's going to affect our health, affect our politics, affect our environment. And actually, most people think urgent action is needed to combat climate change. However, only 40% of the people saying countries are doing enough on climate change. So how can we change that narrative? So this is another global diagram. I'm not sure if I got any friends from Latin America in today's talk. I usually get a lot of people from Europe, but interestingly, you can see Latin America and Africa, even though they are the countries that might not be generate the most number of emission, they actually are very concerned about the climate change and much more than in US and in China. So it's quite interesting, I think, to put back in that global perspective. And I don't know, has anybody seen this diagram, the global warming 6 Americas? Has anybody seen this diagram before?
Nope, not seen it.
Okay, so I'm going to explain this diagram. As I said, Yale has a very good program on climate change. So they did this survey of 6 types of Americans who are feeling different ways about climate change. And I think you can do the same in Hong Kong or in London or Bristol, wherever you are. But I'll briefly explain the 6 response. So the first one is alarmed, meaning they're convinced of the reality and seriousness of climate change and are already taking individual, consumer, and political action to address it. So the alarm one are the one who is doing things because they know it's coming. The concern one are those are convinced that global warming is happening and it's a serious problem, but have not yet engaged in the issue personally. So maybe they intellectually they understand it, but they haven't done anything. Cautious is they haven't made up their mind about climate change is happening. Disengaged is they don't know anything about it. Doubtful is they don't know they don't think it's happening. And dismissive is they think it's a hoax and it is against taking action. As you can see, it's quite interesting, right? So you got Americans all across the spectrum. So you got people who are dismissive of climate change at all, and you've also got a large percentage of people who are alarming. They do publish the survey methodology. So if you're interested to do this in Hong Kong or in Bristol and just get a survey of how, so it comes with like 50 questions of how you feel about the environment. I think this is quite an interesting study of how people feel. So, so the question is now, we know that sea level is changing. We know that extreme weather is happening. We know how we live, how we eat. We know like whether we are doing plant-based, whether we are doing recycling. So the way we do is how do we prepare for the changes on our life and minimize the impact. So we're now going to talk about some climate change communication strategy. So one of them is protection. Protection is when you tell people about climate change, you can tell people that we need to protect people and places from being harmed. We need to show concern about people's safety and well-being because they are also helping the environment. We also need to encourage people to take responsibility and be open-minded and long-term planning. And again, if you want to do more research on each of this like green value, there's some very good resource here, and you'll get the slide in NNLCCI. It tells you how do you actually use these concepts in your communication. So I'm just going to give you a very quick overview here, but if you want to learn more, I really encourage you to go to this website. So another example, using metaphor and wording wisely is also important. So I'm sure a lot of you heard about greenhouse gas and all that. So greenhouse gas is basically a heat trapping blanket. It traps the greenhouse gas, so the earth is getting warmer. However, according to climate change research, we should actually avoid talking about greenhouse gases. And the reason is because actually the reason of climate change is because of fossil fuel that causes the carbon dioxide gas. So greenhouse gases itself is not wrong. It's because of fossil fuel that we are increasing the climate change. So it also, like, some people might confuse the cause of climate change with the hole in the ozone layer, or confuse carbon dioxide with carbon monoxide, or assume because carbon dioxide is natural and carbon dioxide is part of the greenhouse gas, so it cannot be harmful. So these are some things you might want to think of when you want to carry that message. So maybe instead of telling people to avoid to beware of greenhouse gas, but really stress on fossil fuels. So this is one suggestions. Another suggestion, so this is a comic about climate change. So in the 90s, we think, oh, climate change can be a problem. In the 1995, climate change is definitely a problem, and we should be really get going. And then it seems in the recent year, should we talk about climate change anymore? Is it too old? However, I think it is both important to talk about the science behind climate change and also the solution to climate change. And the reason is because climate change requires action at all levels, not only an individual, but also government and citizens. And to do that, we need the citizen to understand the cause and impact of climate change. So other than just talking about solution, I think it is still important to talk about climate change and the science behind it. So even though, like, for example, in Encompass, we do the climate change and coffee and climate change and wine topic, before we go to the fun part, talk about coffee and wine, we each of our presentation do start with a brief intro about the science of climate change. We talk about the heat trapping blanket. We talk about the Anthropocene, the uprising. So I think it's important for people to understand what is really going on. And so this is, for example, a discussion framework. You can use that with your community. So first of all, it's happening. It is really happening. And why is it happening? Because it's us. We are the one who is causing the climate change. And it's bad because it impacts our wildlife, it impacts our health. But we also want to say there's hope. We want to give people hope and not say everything is doom and gloom. Because if you don't give hope to people, you will feel all this like eco paralysis. You feel like you can't do anything. So I think maybe this is one of the take-home message for today. Again, this is another very good resource called Climate Officials. I will show some of the examples here, but basically here is if you want to discuss climate change, try to show real people, use new narratives, show local impacts, so people understand it's not somewhere far away, like in the North Pole, but really something that happened. So these are some suggestions you can use in terms of climate change. And this is one example. So the first diagram you see in the top is a doom and gloom. It shows that there's an industrial complex relaxing pollutants. It seems, oh, it's so sad. But in the bottom, you see that people are taking action, that people are installing a solar panel. So this type of success stories can show people that they can really make a change to scale up. So because really, I mean, I think we come across many sad images every day, whether it's the Myanmar protest or everything. If we just show like very depressing image, it will cause people to shut down and become apathetic. So how do we shift the narrative? So another tips is to overcome the psychological distance. So trying to say that climate change is not just something that happened very distant, very far off. It's happening here. It's happening now, and we need to communicate that to people so people understand the long-term impact. And again, I think one of the take-home message is also go beyond polar bear. I think we all have seen this polar bear image about climate change, but however, it gives the impression the problem is far off in distance. And I will give you some example of what you can show in your community, and that might be helpful for you to communicate the climate change topic. So again, this is another research is to encourage people to take actions in their own life. People can be empowered when they come into climate change, and I will show you an example of that. So basically, we want that people can believe that their action can make a difference, and that their action can meaningfully contribute, and also believing whatever community that they are with, they are capable of action. So maybe Carol here can share some of the work she did with Friends of Cyclone later. How is that local group doing some, I don't know whether it's recycling or beach cleanup to make changes. So again, we want to this is a model about how to use empowering messages to bring hope and meaningful action for people. So I hope you are leaving today feeling better about climate change and not worse. And that's my hope today. I don't want you to feel more depressed than you are before you come here. So one example is this is a UK example. Manchester United Foundation. So they have this a campaign called Show the Love. So instead of showing like doom and gloom images about climate change, they feature like school children taking part in climate change talk. They show that animals are benefiting from climate change. So when you communicate climate change, instead of just saying very depressing, there's flooding, there's like extreme weather, maybe you can also think about using positive imagery. And also developing new climate change narratives, and I will give you some examples of that. For example, incorporate narratives that everyday people can engage with. So engage in something that is really maybe personal, so that people can relate to. So for example, communicating uncertainty. So there's like with all science, there are certain uncertainty with the climate change. So just like a vaccine is not 100% effective, and people have been debating the risks and the uncertainty with the vaccine. So for example, for the climate, the myth is that scientists don't agree on the causes of global warming. The actual climate science is that 97% of the practicing climate scientists agree that human activities are the cause of the recent climate change. So how can we communicate uncertainty better? So one of the example is shift from uncertainty to risk. So for example, like many like insurance, health, and national security or government people, they like to talk about risk of climate change, then talk about uncertainty. So we talk about, oh, it's risk of flooding, risk of disrupting our school, instead of there's a great new deal unknown about the local surface. So I think just from the simple way of communicating into that, rather than just talking about uncertainty, that might be one way of helping to build the narrative. Another example, we have uncertain time and uncertain outcome. So both of this statement basically say the same thing. But the first statement saying that sea level will rise by at least 50 cm, and this will occur sometime between 2060 and 2093. So this one has an uncertain time frame, whereas the second one, by 2072, sea levels will rise between 25 and 68 cm, so uncertain outcome. So the first one will be more powerful, and the second one in terms of the climate change statement. So I don't know how many of you are involved in climate change communication. You might want to use this technique when you communicate climate science. So again, the officials try to show real people behind the climate change. So instead of like the classic polar bear message, maybe you can use for example, an image like that about young people planting trees, trying to reduce eco footprint. And if you want to have some really good visuals on climate officials, you can go to this organization called climateofficials.org. There are tons of like stock images about children, about like solar panel that you can use to communicate positively about climate. So again, like with all learning, and I'm sure Tiff here will agree that you instead of just lecturing, and I know I've been doing quite a bit of that today, but I think if you involve the people, you will help them to understand the science behind climate change. So this is, for example, an example. You can read this. So this is a dialogue on climate change. So I'll give you a moment to read this. So basically, you are saying that climate change is really happening. But and your friend said, how am I going to take my dog for a walk? She goes stir crazy in the house because it's so warm. So I think one way is to acknowledge those feelings and help others to understand that their reaction is normal for climate change and that they are not alone. So that's quite important. Tiff, you want to add anything as a therapist? I'm gonna pick on you if you're still there.
I'm there. I'll wait till the very end. I'm still absorbing everything you're contributing. Thank you.
Okay, sure. So this is another technique you can use to talk about climate change. So for example, you can use the open technique. Is it all right if we talk a little bit about climate change? What comes into mind? So arts about imagery, about adjective. So and then reflect. So if that person said that they can't, they're overwhelming, maybe you can reflect that back. So acknowledge their feeling. And then maybe tell, can I share with you a little bit what I've been learning, thinking about? So share about what you can do and ask how you're feeling about all this like very overwhelming thing. And close just to acknowledge that it means a lot for me for you to have that conversation. So just to acknowledge that other people, that you are taking them seriously. So I don't know how many of you, maybe you're a school teacher or you need to engage in a community group. These are some techniques. And I do want to share this one with you. This one is on race, but I think it can be applied to any difficult conversation. I don't know how many of you have seen it. This is called a courageous conversation framework. So let's say when I talk about climate change, I come from a very intellectual standpoint. I give you all the like statistics and facts, but maybe the other people feel very emotional about it because their friends have been killed by like climate change for them. Okay, I'm just dramatizing it, but maybe they feel very emotional with it. So how can you connect a person feeling very emotional about climate change to an intellectual standpoint, and how can you motivate them to act, to relate them to their friends? So again, this is a framework developed for race, but I think for any difficult conversation, and like this one we just talked about on climate, I think this is quite a good way for you to think about those narratives. So just want to see if anybody here want to give this a go. So here are some statements about climate change. So if you hear those statements, and given what you have learned today, how might you respond to those? Anybody want to give it a try? It's not easy, I know.
I guess just the first one, you just acknowledge how they're feeling first, like, kind of say that they're being reasonable by being overwhelmed, but then maybe suggest that not thinking about it isn't the best way to go about it, and that they make sure that they know that they do have the power to change things if they put it into action.
Yeah. Thank you, Kesley. I wonder, you said like about your community in Bristol. Have you engaged in like a difficult debate with somebody in your community about climate change?
To be honest, the people that I surround myself with are usually of the same opinion as me. So there's a lot of like Extinction Rebellion protests, things like that, which people are all really for, kind of having conversations like this. But it's more when I leave Bristol that I come into contact with people who either just don't think they can make any difference, or they don't think it's their responsibility to, because like we said earlier about how the big corporations are quite heavily to blame for a lot of the problems we're seeing. I guess they think that it's out of their hands.
Yeah, I think how you have that narrative with people. So people, like, unfortunately, like what I share, I think there are still some like people who are denying climate change, or they think whatever they do, it won't change. So how do we make people make a change? Is it protest? It is something else, right?
Yeah, I think it's just about empowering people and making them feel, I guess, accountable or just responsible for their own actions without it being overwhelming, which is a difficult balance to strike.
Thank you, Kelsey. If you can, maybe you can share your contact with the rest of the group. Would like to get connected with you and see how you're doing in Bristol.
Yeah, absolutely. Put some stuff in the chat.
Anybody want to have another go with any of the statement?
I agree with what Kelsey said. But basically, it's very hard to persuade people because they think, you know, it's the government and the big companies, so they think they feel powerless. But I always say that if each person does a small thing, all of those small things add up to a big thing. And I think that's just where we have to start from.
Thank you, Carol. I just have a few more slides, and maybe we can open up the platform. I think this is the most fun part, that the group will share however you feel or whatever tips you have for each other. So I just want to go through very quickly. This is I'm doing another talk in a week on climate change and coffee. It's usually quite fun. We talk about how climate change affect the coffee industry and what you can do about it. Again, it's also free. So if you want to join us, please do. Another one, I've shared this in my other talk before. I don't know how many of you have done it. This is called the Climate Collage. It's a game developed by a French NGO, but it's available in all languages, even Chinese. And I really love it because basically you see all the arrows here. There are different things like climate refugees or terrestrial biodiversity or temperature rise. And as a group, you would be learning about this different causes and effects, and you'll be linking those up. I think I still believe most of this section you can do it online for free. And I have done it before, and I even though I think I know a lot about climate change, I still learn a lot from it. And there's also a kids version for it. The kids version is, I think, 21 cards, and the adult version is 42 cards. And for those of you who are interested in learning about climate collage or climate change, you can actually, for a very small fee, I think it's like UK £20, you can get trained as a facilitator, and you can do this with your community. So I don't know if Kelsey, if this is something helpful in your community, you want to tell your friends about it and use this to encourage a climate change dialogue. So just want to put it out there. And yeah, that's all from me. So thank you, everybody. I'm going to stop the recording so people